21 medical facts about diabetes and obesity. 1. The insulin key, the gatekeeper of the cell. Every time you eat, your pancreas releases insulin, a master hormone that acts as a biometric key. Imagine your muscle cells are high-security vaults that require glucose to function. Insulin arrives at the cell's surface, slides into a specific receptor lock, and signals the glucose gates, GLUT4 transporters, to open. In a healthy system, this allows sugar to leave the bloodstream and enter the cell efficiently. However, in obesity, these locks become jammed by circulating lipids and inflammatory signaling molecules, a state known as insulin resistance. The key still turns, but the internal machinery is gummed up. This forces the pancreas to pump out even more insulin to force the doors open, leading to hyperinsulinemia. This hormonal overdrive eventually wears the system down, causing the locks to break entirely and leaving the sugar to rot in the bloodstream, damaging everything it touches. 2. The adipose organ. Fat is a living chemical factory. For decades, medicine viewed body fat as a passive storage tank, like a backpack full of extra fuel. We now know that adipose tissue is one of the most active endocrine organs in the body. Imagine your fat cells are chemical broadcasters, sending out a non-stop stream of signals. In obesity, these cells become overstuffed and stressed, triggering an immune response. They begin secreting pro-inflammatory cytokines, like TNF-alpha and IL-6. These chemicals act like biological static that interferes with your brain's hunger signals and your liver's sugar management. Fat isn't just sitting there. It is actively rewriting your internal chemistry, driving a state of low-grade systemic inflammation. This chronic fire is the primary engine that drives the progression from simple weight gain to full-blown type 2 diabetes, essentially poisoning the well of your metabolism. 3. The visceral vault, the danger of internal fat. Not all fat is created equal. Subcutaneous fat, the kind you can pinch, is relatively stable, but visceral fat, wrapped around your organs, is like toxic waste stored in a city center. This deep abdominal fat is metabolically hyperactive and angry. Imagine it as a leaky pipe that drains inflammatory fatty acids directly into the portal vein, sending them straight to your liver. This causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, which triggers the liver to ignore insulin's commands and start overproducing sugar. Даже человек, который выглядит относительно худым, может иметь опасный уровень висцерального жира. Состояние, известное как TOFI, тонкий снаружи, жирный внутри. This explains why waist circumference is a much more lethal predictor of heart disease and diabetes than the total number on your bathroom scale, as it measures the internal toxin load. 4. The glycation glaze, how sugar caramelizes your blood. When blood sugar remains high, a destructive process called glycation occurs. Imagine your red blood cells are delicate pieces of equipment being dipped in a thick, sticky syrup. Sugar molecules permanently bond to the proteins in your blood, creating advanced glycation end products, AGEs. This is what we measure with the HbA1c test. These glazed cells become stiff, brittle, and jagged. As they circulate, they act like microscopic sandpaper, physically scraping and scarring the delicate inner lining of your arteries, the endothelium. Over years, this caramelization of your protein structures leads to the hardening of the arteries, the clouding of the lenses in your eyes, cataracts, and the eventual structural failure of the microscopic filters in your kidneys, effectively turning your internal plumbing into a brittle, clogged mess. 5. The leptin barrier. Why willpower often fails. Leptin is the hormone produced by fat cells to tell your brain, we have enough energy, stop eating. In a perfect world, more fat would mean more leptin and a natural loss of appetite. However, in chronic obesity, the brain develops leptin resistance. Imagine a smoke alarm that has been screaming so loud for so long that the brain has simply muted the sound to survive the noise. Even though the body has massive energy reserves, the brain perceives it as in a state of literal starvation. This creates an agonizing biological hunger that overrides logic and shame. It isn't a character flaw. It is a broken fuel gauge in the hypothalamus that makes the body fight to defend its highest weight, perceiving every diet as a threat to its survival. This biological survival drive is so strong that it can bypass almost any amount of conscious willpower. 6. The hepatic factory, the liver's sugar production. In type 2 diabetes, the liver forgets how to follow instructions. Normally, the liver acts as a smart backup battery, releasing glucose only when you truly need it. However, when the liver becomes insulin-resistant and fatty, it begins to pump out sugar, even when your blood levels are already dangerously high. Imagine a factory where the stop button is broken, and the machines keep churning out products that the market is already drowning in. This inappropriate glucose production is why many diabetics wake up with high blood sugar even after a 12-hour fast. The liver has been working overtime while they slept, flooding the system with unnecessary fuel. This internal overproduction makes managing diabetes a 24/7 battle that goes far beyond what you put on your plate, as your own internal organs are sabotaging your efforts to stay balanced. 7. The pancreatic burnout, the death of beta cells. The beta cells in your pancreas are the only cells in your entire body capable of producing insulin. During the early stages of insulin resistance, these cells work at 200% capacity to keep your blood sugar normal. Imagine a marathon runner forced to sprint at full speed for 20 miles without a break. Eventually, the runner's heart gives out. This is beta cell exhaustion. By the time a person is officially diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they have often already lost 50% of their functional beta cell mass. These cells are also poisoned by high levels of sugar, glucotoxicity, and fat, lipotoxicity, which can trigger apoptosis or cell death. This leads to a permanent, irreversible decline in the body's ability to regulate its own energy, eventually making external insulin injections a necessity for survival, as your internal insulin factory permanently shuts down. 8. The renal threshold. When the kidneys leak sugar. Your kidneys act as a sophisticated filtration system, usually reclaiming 100% of the glucose your body needs. However, there is a spillover point called the renal threshold. Imagine a dam designed to hold back a river. If the water level rises too high, it begins to spill uncontrollably over the top. When blood sugar exceeds roughly 180 milligrams per deciliter, the kidneys can no longer catch the sugar, and it begins to leak into the urine, glycosuria. This sugar pulls massive amounts of water with it through osmosis, leading to chronic dehydration, extreme thirst, and frequent urination. It is the body's desperate, last-ditch effort to flush the toxic excess of sugar out of the system. But this process places an enormous mechanical and chemical strain on the kidney's delicate filtration units, eventually scarring them and leading to chronic kidney disease. 9. The neuropathic short circuit, nerve damage. High blood sugar acts as a slow-acting neurotoxin. Imagine the nerves in your feet and hands are long, delicate fiber optic cables protected by a thin sheath. Chronic hyperglycemia destroys the tiny blood vessels, vasa nervorum, that feed these nerves, essentially starving them of oxygen and nutrients. Furthermore, excess sugar enters the nerve cells and converts into sorbitol, which causes the cells to swell and short circuit. This leads to diabetic neuropathy. Patients may feel phantom burning, tingling, or, most dangerously, a complete loss of sensation. When the cables are cut, a small blister or a pebble in your shoe can cause a wound that goes entirely unnoticed. Without the pain alarm to warn you, these wounds can quickly turn into deep ulcers and life-threatening infections that may require amputation as the brain loses all contact with its peripheral outposts. 10. The lipotoxicity wall, fat in the wrong places. When your dedicated fat cells reach their storage limit, fat begins to spill over into organs that were never meant to handle it. The liver, the heart, and even the skeletal muscles. This is lipotoxicity. Imagine trying to store oily, flammable rags in a delicate computer server room. In the muscles, this ectopic fat creates toxic metabolites that physically block the signaling pathways insulin uses to move glucose. It creates a biological wall that the insulin key cannot penetrate. This fat-induced interference is the primary driver of the insulin resistance seen in type 2 diabetes. The body isn't just overweight, it is misstoring its energy in a way that physically disables its primary metabolic machinery, turning your own energy reserves into a weapon against your health and rendering your most active tissues incapable of utilizing the fuel they need. 11. The GLP-1 messenger, the gut's secret signal. Your gut is a highly intelligent sensory organ that releases a hormone called GLP-1 the moment food touches your small intestine. Imagine GLP-1 as a pre-alert radio signal sent to the pancreas, telling it to prepare for impact, sugar is coming. It also travels to the brain to trigger the sensation of fullness and slows down the stomach's emptying speed so you don't overeat. In people with obesity and diabetes, this gut-to-brain signal is often muted, broken, or far too short-lived. Modern miracle weight loss drugs work by mimicking this natural signal, but staying in the blood for days instead of minutes. This restores the brain's ability to feel satisfied and the pancreas's ability to respond to food with surgical precision, effectively rewiring the communication between your stomach and your mind and bypassing the metabolic noise that previously led to overconsumption. 12. The microvascular mesh, small vessel destruction. Diabetes doesn't just attack the large arteries, it systematically destroys the capillaries, the tiny hair-thin vessels that feed your eyes and kidneys. Imagine a delicate garden being watered by a mist system. High blood sugar turns that mist into a high-pressure, jagged slurry that tears the mesh apart. In the eyes, retinopathy, this leads to the body trying to grow emergency new vessels that are fragile and leak blood, clouding your vision. In the kidneys, nephropathy, the tiny filters become clogged and scarred, failing to clear the blood of toxins. This microvascular damage is the leading cause of blindness and kidney failure worldwide. Sugar effectively shreds the finest infrastructure of your body, turning a life-sustaining distribution network into a system of widespread tissue destruction and organ failure. 13. The muscle sink, the primary glucose consumer. Your skeletal muscles are the primary sink for glucose, consuming about 80% of the sugar you eat. Imagine your muscles are the largest, hungriest engines in a massive factory. When you move, these engines suck glucose out of the blood even without the help of insulin, a process called non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake. This is why physical activity is the most powerful drug for diabetes. Even a simple 10-minute walk after a meal opens the valves of the muscle engines, physically pulling the sugar out of the bloodstream and dramatically lowering the workload on your struggling pancreas. In a sedentary person, these engines are switched off, forcing the sugar to remain in the blood where it begins to caramelize and destroy your tissues. Exercise doesn't just burn calories, it physically clears the glucose traffic jam in your arteries. 14. The microbiome shift, bacteria and metabolism. The trillions of bacteria in your gut act as an invisible organ that can either protect you from or drive you toward diabetes. Imagine your gut is a garden. If you eat a diet high in processed sugars, you grow fat-loving bacteria that produce toxic chemicals called LPS. This endotoxemia causes the gut wall to become leaky, allowing inflammation to seep into your blood and jam your insulin receptors. Research shows that people with type 2 diabetes have a significantly different bacterial map than lean individuals. By feeding your good bacteria with fiber and fermented foods, you produce short-chain fatty acids that naturally improve insulin sensitivity and help regulate your appetite from the inside out. Your weight is, in many ways, a reflection of which species are winning the war in your gut, and these microscopic allies can be your strongest defense against metabolic decay. 15. The sleep paradox, the cortisol connection. Lack of sleep is a direct metabolic poison. When you don't get enough rest, your body enters a state of high alert, releasing cortisol. Imagine cortisol as an emergency energy signal that tells the liver to dump its stored sugar into the blood so you can fight or flee the perceived threat of exhaustion. Just one night of poor sleep can make a healthy person as insulin-resistant as a diabetic the very next day. Chronic sleep deprivation also suppresses leptin, the fullness hormone, and spikes ghrelin, the hunger hormone, creating a double whammy where you are biologically driven to overeat sugar while your body is simultaneously losing the ability to process it. Sleep is not a luxury. It is the vital time when your metabolic dashboard is reset to zero, allowing your hormones to synchronize and your insulin sensitivity to recover for the day ahead. 16. The ghrelin ghost, the hunger hormone. Ghrelin is the go signal for hunger, produced primarily in the stomach. Imagine a bell that rings every time your stomach is empty. In people who have lost significant weight, ghrelin levels often increase and stay high for months or even years. This is a biological ghost that haunts the person with constant gnawing cravings. This is the body's evolutionary way of trying to defend its fat stores against perceived famine. Weight loss isn't just a matter of losing fat. It's a long-term battle against this hormonal alarm that tries to drive you back to your previous highest weight. Successful weight maintenance requires understanding that your hunger is often a chemical signal sent by an ancient survival system, not a failure of your character or self-control. This hormone effectively turns your own stomach into an adversary in the fight for a stable weight. 17. The atherosclerosis engine, sugar and plaque. Diabetes and obesity are the primary fuels for atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. High blood sugar makes your bad LDL cholesterol particles smaller and denser, making them more likely to get stuck in the arterial walls. Imagine your arteries are a smooth, high-speed highway. Sugar creates potholes and turns the traffic, cholesterol, into sticky, jagged glass. Once the cholesterol is trapped, the immune system attacks it, creating a calcified plaque. This plaque narrows the highway, restricting blood flow and forcing the heart to work harder. If this plaque ruptures, it creates an instant clot that causes a heart attack or stroke. Diabetes doesn't just raise sugar. It fundamentally changes the physics of your blood, making it stickier and more abrasive, which turns every heartbeat into a potential source of arterial damage. 18. The brain fog. Type 3. Diabetes? Some researchers now refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. The brain requires a massive amount of glucose, but it also requires insulin to process it and clear out waste. When the brain becomes insulin resistant, it loses the ability to wash itself of toxic proteins like beta amyloid. Imagine a high-performance computer that can't clear its cache memory. Eventually, the system slows down and crashes. This brain insulin resistance starves the neurons of energy and allows toxic debris to build up, leading to cognitive decline and memory loss. Maintaining stable blood sugar and insulin sensitivity is not just about your waistline. It is about protecting the hardware of your mind from long-term decay, ensuring that your cognitive distribution network remains efficient and clear of the sugar sludge that drives dementia. 19. The dawn phenomenon, the morning spike. Many diabetics are confused why their blood sugar is higher at 7 a.m. than it was at 11 p.m., despite not eating. This is the dawn phenomenon. Imagine your body has an internal alarm clock that prepares you for the day. Around 3 or 4 a.m., the brain signals the liver to release a burst of glucose to give you energy to wake up. In a healthy person, insulin manages this spike easily. In a diabetic, the brakes, insulin, don't work, so the sugar levels soar. This proves that blood sugar isn't just about what you eat. It's about the complex, rhythmic orchestration of your hormones. Your body is essentially revving the engine for a day it can't handle, flooding your system with fuel that your cells cannot absorb, leading to a state of morning toxicity that sets a dangerous tone for the rest of your daily cycle. 20. The epigenetic echo, the genetic memory. Obesity and diabetes can leave a memory in your DNA that is passed down to children. This is epigenetics. Imagine your genes are like a book. Your lifestyle highlights certain chapters. If a parent has poorly managed diabetes or obesity at the time of conception, it can highlight the chapters in the child's DNA that make them more likely to struggle with weight and insulin resistance from birth. This isn't a destiny, but it is a biological headwind that the next generation must fight. Understanding this fact emphasizes that metabolic health is a multi-generational responsibility, where the choices of the parent can influence the metabolic starting point of the child, potentially pre-programming their internal storage yard to be overactive and their power grid to be fragile before they even take their first breath. 21. The reversibility Sith. Remission versus cure. While type 2 diabetes is often called permanent, modern science shows it can be put into remission. Imagine your metabolism is a broken bridge. You can't necessarily fix the bridge to its original state, but through significant weight loss, especially visceral fat, and muscle building, you can reroute the traffic so the bridge isn't needed. When a person loses 10 to 15% of their body weight, the fat drains out of the liver and pancreas, allowing them to function normally again. It isn't a cure. If the weight returns, the traffic jam will return too. But it is a state of metabolic peace, where the body can once again regulate its own energy without medication. This remission allows the body's internal distribution center to recover its efficiency, effectively turning back the clock on years of metabolic damage and restoring a state of biological harmony.